So my best friend and I, we were way up in the mountains in northern India. We found this old temple, and there was basically nobody up there except for this one guy. And I poked my head into this little cave in the mountain, which had been formed into a temple. And this man was sitting there in front of this little fire. And all he had was a stick to tend the fire, and he had a piece of cloth wrapped around his waist. That's it. And the guy just sits there and tends this sacred fire. And at meal times, the temple guards hike up the mountain and they bring him some rice and bread and water, because he's sitting there for 12 hours straight with his butt on the cold stone floor of this cave. Then finally, another man comes to replace him after 12 hours and does that same process for another 12 hours. And that process repeats itself over and over again, day in, day out, and has for the last 500 years. They say that even higher up on the mountain, there are fires that have been burning for over 1,000 years. And these sacred fires, they're basically never allowed to go out. And the reason they burn is because one day they will be needed. And so, right, you're probably wondering, James, you teach people about gardening, growing food at home. Why are you talking about a dude in a cave in the mountains of India? Not long ago, we were all flame keepers. We lived in harmony with Earth. We knew how to work with her. We revered and respected her power and wisdom. Then over the last 120 years or so, something shifted. We became impatient, needing more and more, faster and faster. We disconnected from Earth, and we morphed into this strange cyborg creature. This creature that was hell-bent on consuming everything and stopping at nothing. And today, in the famous words of Agent Smith in The Matrix, humans have become a disease on this planet, like a cancer, eating the earth down to the bones like maggots. Far from the earth beings we were for 100,000 years. And now it's time to change who we are, because if we don't, humanity probably won't make it. You know, it's so easy to be distracted from what the real problems are nowadays, and that's why the solutions seem so far-fetched and off in the future and complicated, and these big tech moguls like Elon Muskmelon, as I call him, and Billy Gates, all these rich, powerful people are constantly talking about how the only solution is to go to Mars and to everyone drive electric cars and to eat fake meat made in the lab. It's all totally insane, because the most important things like the soil, the seed, the worms, sunlight, and our role as humans and how we interact with the earth, all that gets completely buried and ignored. You've got utterly toxic food. Newborns fresh out of the womb have glyphosate in their urine, and 93% of the population has glyphosate in their urine. And as you know, glyphosate is the carcinogenic chemical in Roundup, the weed killer, which the industrial farming model needs because it's so incredibly primitive, it can't figure out how to get weeds not to choke out the crops, which if you're a flame keeper, that's like growing 101. It's like the most rudimentary and easy thing to figure out, and yet conventional farmers around the world spray over like 6 billion tons of this shit on their crops every year. And so it's my hope that if enough of us start showing another way to not use these chemicals, then maybe other conventional farmers will see like, oh wow, we don't naturally need to spray herbicides and pesticides all over everything, and it actually is possible to grow in a more productive way that works together with nature. And that's really the mission of Flame Keepers. Well, we're reaching a point where children not only think that potatoes grow on trees, but they also think that a bell pepper comes from the grocery store. They don't understand that it comes from the earth. And so as a result, we've got hundreds upon hundreds of different plants and varieties of foods that are completely disappearing off the face of the earth because nobody's growing them anymore. If you look back 100 years ago, families kept seeds and they passed them along generation to generation to generation, so much so that a single family would name these weird varieties of tomatoes and squash and lettuce after their grandparents, and it would basically be like their family tomato that had been passed down. It was completely unique to their family. And today we've gone from like thousands of beautiful, delicious, diverse, unique crops down to like 8. Those crops like corn, potatoes, rice, these are all the ones that are most heavily genetically modified, which is incredibly damaging and terrible for human health. It kind of makes you wonder, like, if nobody steps up and takes on this important, vital role of keeping these last dying seed varieties alive and growing them and enjoying them and passing them down, then really it's just a question of how long will it take before the Monsantos of the world control every last seed. We cannot let that happen. That's something that's only can be done by individuals. No corporation is going to do it. Governments aren't going to do it, because these seeds have to be actively grown and cared for by individuals in diverse parts of the world. And that's another mission of the Flame Keepers. My grandfather in the 1950s worked at a Goodyear tire store, and he made, $30,000 a year salary, supported a family of 7 on his salary, and the house that he bought cost about $40,000. So maybe in 3 to 5 years at most, he could pay off the mortgage and own the house, and that was the American dream. And today, nobody can seem to figure out why it takes like over 30 years to pay off a mortgage, and why most people live paycheck to paycheck and are constantly stressed about money. It has nothing to do with Democrats and Republicans and the minimum wage and more jobs and affordable housing, and that's all a distraction. The answer is, it's a setup. Modern humans are hardwired into a corrupt monetary system that's extremely complex and ultimately rigged to transfer wealth from the poor and middle class, even the rich class, and concentrate it to the tippy top of the hands of the 1% of the 1%, which is the banker class. Now there's a reason why they don't teach us about the monetary system in school, because if you knew how rigged it was, you'd be like, Pat, I'm not playing that game, I can't win that game. And so today, the only solution that I see, the only solution left, is to opt out. This is the solution that the Flame Keepers are going after, which is to own your life, create freedom and prosperity. And the only way to do that is recognizing that the earth is and always will be the core source of abundance. Think about a tomato plant. You slice it open and there's hundreds of seeds inside. And if you planted all 100 seeds, you'd have at least 100 plants. Out of those 100 tomato plants, they're going to produce several hundred tomatoes. And several hundred tomatoes are going to give several thousand seeds, and you plant those, and now you've got 10,000 tomatoes. And before you know it, you've got more tomatoes than you can ever possibly eat or share or sell. All that from a single seed inside of a single tomato. This is an exponential code for abundance that is quite literally programmed into the DNA of all plants and trees. And if you know how to work with the earth, earth always provides. Earth provides food and shelter, building materials, water, medicine, beauty, joy, and in such great abundance that all we need to do is remember how to sync up with her again. And we just need to remember the old ways, live them, and keep them alive so that future generations will have this sacred knowledge in the future. The Flame Keepers are those of us practicing, guarding, and protecting the ancient wisdom. We keep and stoke the flames of the old ways, the ways of the seeds, the ways of the soil, the ways of the plants, trees, and bees, the ways of listening to nature and using her guidance to let abundance happen. Because, let's face it, the food revolution will not be televised, and the modern addiction to destruction will not simply come to a halt tomorrow. As much as people say they want change. And I believe we first will reach a point where we cannot continue to live in such disharmony with the earth. But we're not there yet, not even close. However, one day in the future, humans will need the old ways again. They'll need the seeds again, the worms again, and they'll need to know which edible plants sprout soonest in spring. And that's where you come in. Humanity will desperately need you, the Flame Keeper, the one who's been gently feeding the flames of these vital ancient practices, and the one who knows the basics of how to live on Earth, seeds, sun, and soil. Because one day in the future, humanity, with desperate panic, will flock to the Flame Keepers like you and me and our descendants for the warmth of this precious life-giving wisdom. It's not your wisdom, of course. It's our shared wisdom of how we work and live with the earth. For I predict that humanity will not survive otherwise. Old ways will be the number one most valuable currency of the future. It won't be technology or computers or cryptocurrency or how to get to Mars. And I don't think we'll have resources for Mr. Muskmelon's frivolous fantasy. And the currency will switch back to soil, seeds, microbes, fungi, compost, worms, animals, and most of all, the wisdom of how to synthesize it all into the magical orchestra of life. So, will you join me? Will you light your Flame Keeper's torch, and will you dedicate some of your precious time and life energy to keeping these old ways alive? For me, this is my mission. This is my life's purpose, and it's why I'm on this giant blue rock cruising through space. So my question is, do you have what it takes to be one of the Flame Keepers?